Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to this week's home group questions. I don't know about you, but I've been really blessed over the last couple of weeks looking at the fruits of the Spirit. And I think just really tackling what does it mean to be a church that has love, that has joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness, self-control. What does it mean for us? Again, because the Holy Spirit lives in us, these are the signs that the Holy Spirit is in us as believers. So if we're not seeing these characteristics being displayed in our lives and being displayed in our church community, then there's something wrong. So last Sunday, I was preaching on self-control, which is the last listed fruit of the Spirit. And it's a very important attribute to have, which is self-control. And Paul makes his point really clear with this. And I was looking at James chapter 1, verses 19 to 27. And this is James, the brother of Jesus. And he's speaking to a particular Jewish congregation. And he's reminding them what a life looks like being controlled by the Spirit. If we're controlled by the Spirit, we shouldn't have anger. Christians shouldn't be consumed by anger. Christians shouldn't use their words carelessly and use their words to bring people down. But he encourages people to have self-control. And there are particular things that clearly were an issue in James's day. And he highlights these issues, which I mentioned, which is anger and using the mouth. And he refers to as using the tongue. And I was really encouraging us to identify as Christians, what are some of the things that we struggle to control? Maybe there are particular sinful addictions that we have. It could be anger. It could be lust. It could be lack of self-control with money and all other things that could be bothering us as Christians. But I wanted to give us the appeal because Paul gives us this appeal and also James gives us this appeal as well, is that we're not alone in this. There is no sin too hard for God to overcome in our lives. We have to really understand this as Christians. We have the Holy Spirit who will help us in our search to be in self-control. So I really hope you were encouraged by the sermon. If you get an opportunity to listen, it'll be good for you to have a listen and just really allow God to speak to you through His Word. And so we're going to have some questions today. And I really want us to have a time of reflection. This is the last videos that we're doing on the fruits of the Spirit. And I just think that, we really want to take this part seriously, take all of them seriously, but take this last session, this last video, just really reflecting on some of the other fruits of the Spirit, but particularly today, focusing on self-control and really identifying what are the things that you are struggling with. So we're going to go into our first question now. One of the things about God is that we know that God doesn't do things randomly. He doesn't just do things without thinking. He has a reason for doing what he does. And there's a reason why the Holy Spirit gives us self-control. And it's quite clear that reason is because as Christians and as people in general, we struggle with self-control. I think we like to think that we have control over our bodies, over our minds, but there are times where we slip up and we fall into all sorts of things and we can't control it ourselves for whatever reason. And this is why the Holy Spirit gives us self-control. He helps us to live a life which is obedient to Christ. But I want us to really focus and ask ourselves the question, what would life be like if we didn't have the fruit of the Spirit? If we had no self-control? And I think discussing this will really help us to appreciate the gift of self-control that God has given us.
Well, some reflections from me on an occasion when I felt God gifted me, God helped me with the capacity to have self-control. When Denzil asked me to talk about this, an experience which came to mind was the situation that Em and I went through when we were training for ministry between 2006 and 2010. We were in a church-based placement, and the routine that we had during the week was that I would spend Sundays and Mondays in church. On Tuesdays, I would get up early. I would travel down to Bristol. I'd only get back until Wednesday evening. Then I'd work for the church on Thursday. I'd then have to do more study on Friday. And we had one day off a week as a family, and then it started again. It was a time of enormous stress and strain in terms of doing that study. And it was also a time of strain because the church where we were placed was one where there were a lot of very complicated relationships, quite a few divisions, quite a lot of different factions, I guess, within the church. And a very complicated situation if you are a minister, particularly if you're the associate minister and people want you to take sides and back certain people. There are some seasons in life that you look back and you think, how did we do it? How did we both find the energy to keep going? Myself doing all the studying, Emma doing a lot of stuff to support James and Hannah while working as well. How did we somehow manage to navigate the very complicated relationships which there were in the church and still be able to sustain relationships with people, particularly when there was emotions running very high? Looking back, I just think God was in it. I think God gifted us with the capacity for sort of self-control, for patience, for wisdom almost. And as I look back on that, I kind of feel it was his provision at the moment. It was what we needed. But it was also his provision and kind of his protection for us to get us through to where we needed to be. If we hadn't had that provision, if we hadn't been able to sustain relationships, if we'd maybe fallen out with people, if we'd lost our temper like other people seem to be losing their temper all the time, if I hadn't been able to have the self-discipline to get the studying and get stuff done, we wouldn't have got through that without... Or got through that situation and got to where we needed to be and been able to sort of pursue calling and ministry in the way that we felt God was summoning us to. So I just offer that to you as an example and as an encouragement. I think there are seasons when we go through particular demands and strains, and the only way we do it is with God's provision, the Spirit's provision, giving that particular fruit in our lives. And I pray you know that fruit as well. If you're in a place where having that self-control is especially what you need as his provision for you in this moment.
There are some people in my life that I really admire who have been going through some real challenging times, and I've had people who have said some horrible things towards them, and they've really showed self-control, a self-control that I couldn't imagine that I had. So, there's certain situations that people have been in, and I know if I was in that same situation, I probably would have reacted in a whole different way. So it will be good for you just to share as a group, just to think about some helpful biblical tips on how to have self-control. Of course, we speak about the Holy Spirit, but what are some other practical biblical tips can we give each other to encourage each other, especially for those who are struggling with self-control? It'll be good to discuss these things together as a church. So I really hope that you had a real meaningful time discussing self-control and the fruit of the Spirit, which of course is self-control. And I just really want to appeal to those who are struggling with self-control. Maybe there are particular addictions, particular things that we're struggling to control. I want to remind you that there is a way out, and Jesus has given us this way out. Yes, it does seem hard And I know some people say, look, Denzil, you don't understand. You haven't been through this. Yeah, you're right. But we have the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit understands, and the Holy Spirit is willing to help us. So I really pray that during this time that you would, as a church community, as a home group, just spend some time just to pray. And maybe if you want to be honest with each other, you can be. But if you don't, you can just be honest with God and just lift those things that are controlling you, that have a particular hold in you. Lift it up before the Lord and ask for His Holy Spirit to fill you up more and more and give you that spirit of self-control. Have an awesome week, and I hope to see you all soon. God bless.